Shri Kumaramangalam Birlaji, Srimati Rajshri Birlaji, Professor Michael Sandel, Aditya Birla scholars, distinguished guests. It's a great pleasure to join you all as we mark the silver jubilee of the Aditya Birla Scholarships Program. This initiative is a testimony to a visionary entrepreneur who was way ahead of his contemporaries in globalizing India's economic footprint. His endeavors spread from Southeast Asia to the Middle East and has been further developed thereafter. It spanned a range of domains from textiles and edible oil to metals and carbon black. But the common thread was realizing opportunities abroad to strengthen India at home. It is but appropriate that on this occasion, we reflect on the continued relevance of globalization to Bharat's journey in the Amrit Kal. The partners in the scholarship program also reflect the strength of this commitment. Harnessing the most prestigious institutions of the nation in management, engineering, and law has its own message. So indeed does the intensity of the competition, and we heard a little bit about it, to become an Aditya Birla scholar. My congratulations and indeed my admiration for all those who have achieved this recognition. Ladies and gentlemen, India is today the fifth largest economy in the world, certain to be third by the end of the decade. Our interaction with the world and interest in it have grown proportionately. Our exports have increased significantly in the last decade, especially in services. Investments into India have also more than doubled during this period. There is today a perceptible interest in engaging with us, reflected in the steady flow of high-profile visitors and businesses. Our own very appetite to explore the world has also grown, be it in tourism, education, or work possibilities. We see this not just anecdotally, but in fact in the reality that our passport services are increasing year on year by 10%. In all of this, our entrepreneurs have more than kept pace, establishing their presence in societies and regions far away. The world that Aditya Birla ji had foreseen and sought to prepare us for is today upon us. This deeper linkage between the external world and our national endeavors offers us crucial opportunities to accelerate the quest towards Viksit Bharat. In fact, we take it so seriously that I can declare that foreign policy now as fundamentally purposed to advancing national development apart from ensuring national security. The two goals are, of course, closely linked, as I will explain later. Therefore, much of our diplomacy is dedicated towards promoting exports, attracting investments, sourcing best practices, identifying technologies, and expanding tourism. The cumulative impact is to increase employment opportunities at home. Now, there are different ways of achieving these objectives. The most basic is to promote the Indian brand and strengthen international confidence in partnering with us. Given the diversity of our country, it is necessary to do that at a state level as well. Certainly, it is the business attraction that drives foreign investors and potential projects. But their inclinations are usually strengthened by a favorable enabling environment and a more granular understanding of India's strengths. Technology flows and best practices are also painstaking two-way exercises which require both ends to appreciate its full potential. Similarly, persuading foreign vendors of the attraction of making in India can be an arduous effort. What you often see eventually in India is the outcome of such efforts, and somewhere behind many joint ventures and investments are the contribution of a lot of people who have enabled it. This focus on economic diplomacy has in fact become one of the key changes in our foreign policy in contemporary times. Now, the international situation is also ripe today for more strenuous efforts in that direction. The COVID experience brought home to the world the dangers of depending on a limited geography. It was aggravated by concerns that large production dependencies and market shares can be leveraged for political purposes. As a result, the quest to build more reliable, resilient, and redundant supply chains has assumed salience. Digital sensitivities have further heightened these trends. As we enter the era of AI, who captures, processes, and deploys your data is of utmost importance. Data privacy and cybersecurity are consequently paralleling reliable supply chains as a global priority. That manufacturing and data are also more deeply fused is yet another reality to be taken into account. So, in this scenario, India has an opportunity to board the manufacturing bus that we missed to some extent in the past. It is incumbent on us to develop the logistics, the infrastructure, and the business environment to promote greater industrial production. Side by side, we also need the requisite human resources to make this globally viable. These goals have been at the forefront of our national efforts in recent times. Friends, efforts to engage the world and exploit its inherent opportunities have been given a sharper edge by the stresses and fissures of current times. If you recall the COVID experience, do understand that our ability to produce vaccines within the country was very much influenced by the flow of ingredients from multiple sources abroad. Many of them actually faced regulatory constraints, and some even required incentivizing suppliers. Later on, during the Delta variant, obtaining medical oxygen supplies from abroad on a timely basis was equally critical. Or think back about the consequences of the Ukraine conflict. The impact on the fuel and fertilizer markets was immediate and called for special efforts to protect the Indian consumer. And you're all aware of the counter pressures that we faced in that regard. It is not just health or energy security. Even food security can call for diplomatic initiatives. Our diplomatic energies are equally directed, for example, towards the predictable supply, the predictable availability of lentils and edible oils. And of course, when it comes to defense and high technology that are so essential to our national security, developing access to the best options remains our continuing goal. As we now move into a more technology saturated existence, similar compulsions in respect of critical and emerging technologies as well as critical minerals are now coming into play. Ladies and gentlemen, it is not just our capabilities and consumption that are changing, so too are logistics. Supply chains are partly production, but they are very much routings. the world is still functioning in the post-colonial connectivity grid that was designed for the convenience of the West. As production rebalances globally, there is a growing need for new and efficient pathways of trade. So much so that they have actually today become key in many ways to international collaboration, and I dare say even to international competition. India is committed to realizing two major connectivity initiatives to the West, the IMEC to Europe and Atlantic, and the INSTC to Eurasia. To the east, we are working on a trilateral highway that could eventually extend up to the Pacific. Maritime energy grids and green shipping corridors are examples of new possibilities. Such economics can only be realized through creative diplomacy. So, the world is today increasingly appreciating the India story. We may experience it on a daily basis. So it is important to understand what is it that they see has now become different. Obviously, there's no single answer. It could be one of the 75 new airports, the 16 new metros, the broader and longer national highways, the better quality railway journeys, or perhaps bright young people like many of you. At a policy level, perhaps it is making it easier to do business, easing the living of common citizens, and debureaucratizing our society. Or for that matter, strengthening civic awareness and improving our human resources development. In my own travels, what I most often hear is the admiration for our embrace of digital practices, and I think some of our young friends who were here on the podium were speaking about it. And of course, associated with it, the implications for governance. So here's a point for you to ponder. The more effectively we transform at home, the greater the interest of the world to engage us. The deeper that engagement, the faster we will modernize. Ladies and gentlemen, the world is a competitive place. And to ensure India's rise, we too must continuously sharpen our instincts. As I emphasized, developing capabilities at home is an essential prerequisite. Today, it is common in my own domain to speak about comprehensive national power. We no longer measure each other just by military capabilities or political influence, but take into account technology strengths, economic resilience, human creativity, and societal well-being. No nation can truly develop in a unidimensional manner, and large ones in particular, like us, must have some basic self-sufficiency. That is why we speak of an Atmanirbhar Bharat. Otherwise, in an era of weaponized economics, we leave ourselves seriously open to vulnerabilities. India currently faces two big challenges on that score. One, the scale of our producers, and two, the limits of our technology. Both are changing with each passing year and are indeed interlinked in many ways. In fact, growing bigger and growing deeper are both sides of the same coin. For Bharat to rise, it must develop deep technology strengths and create the capacity to research, to design, and to innovate. That will only happen when manufacturing expands and the industrial culture strikes deep roots. The India stack, Covaxin, 5G technology, the Tejas aircraft, or the Chandrayaan mission are examples of what we can do once we put our minds to it. But this period of building national capabilities will also require deep deliberation and considered policies if we are to move ahead strongly. After all, we must be safeguarded from unfair competition during that process, especially if they could have a strategic intent. Global engagement cannot be argued on narrow economic merits alone without any regard to its social and national security consequences. Indeed, that is one of the takeaways from recent developments in the United States. The promise of technology is also a prospect that deserves greater attention. In the past, we often only did the reforms we must, leaving out the reforms we could or should. The absence of an ambitious national vision also ensured that there was never a set of clear national goals. Much of our policy prescriptions were a rationalization of these limitations rather than a thought through, viable long term strategy. New technologies that put a premium on talent and creativity can now work in our favor. This world of AI and chips, of electric mobility and batteries, of space and drones is poised to transform life in this decade. We cannot and we should not miss out a second time. It is the younger generation that has to lead this effort, and it can only do so when it is sufficiently global. For those who are now ready to explore life's opportunities, it may also be useful to think about the global workplace. We all know that the sharpest change in the immediate future will be brought about by technology. What we usually underestimate are the equally dramatic shifts that are taking place in the world's demography. At the very moment when demands for services are growing and technology advancements themselves require greater human talent, many societies are actually falling short. This is our opportunity. A better educated, skilled, and confident generation of Indians will have openings that could not be contemplated earlier. In fact, the interest in Indian talent is probably the most frequent theme in my conversations right now with foreign governments and corporates. Anticipating this possibility, we have steadily concluded mobility agreements that ensure better access and fair treatment for our professionals. More than 20 nations are currently covered, with others underway. Friends, the twin realities of more Indians traveling abroad in a world under greater stress also raises its own issues. In recent years, you're all familiar with our rescue operations in Ukraine and Sudan, in Israel and Afghanistan, or would recall those in Nepal and Yemen. Our systems are better geared to help individuals in distress abroad, whether it is a lost passport, an employer's mistreatment, or an accident or an emergency requirement. To a business, we help with market understanding and access. To a student, we counsel crucial do's and don'ts. To professionals, we take up their interests with local authorities. The welfare of Indians abroad is manifestly our priority now. And that is a great encouragement to a globalizing generation. Friends, these are exciting times. They are challenging ones as well. As a country, as a community, as individuals, we have possibilities before us that we could not have thought about earlier. It can be realized only through confidence, through initiative, and obviously through hard work. But in all of that, it is important that we provide the maximum opportunities for our creativity to express itself. It starts from the grassroots and percolates through every level of society. Those of you who today are selected for this prestigious fellowship must appreciate that this is a testimony to your talent as much as it is an exhortation to realize your potential. Just as drops of water make an ocean, a nation is ultimately built by individuals. Each one of you can make a difference and will certainly do with greater awareness of the world and its many possibilities. I thank you for your attention.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Uh, Ladies and gentlemen, as we have received some questions already, we're going to take a look at those. And, sir, what has happened is that we had asked in the beginning, before you arrived, if people could submit a question. You can still do so by scanning the QR code on the screen and share your questions with us. We look forward to a very insightful exchange. And, sir, I request you to please be seated as I've got with me some of the questions that have been sent to us. I'm very excited about them. So here we go. So, sir, we've been sent these questions from various people who scanned the QR code. More questions are coming in. But I'd love to start with just using the lucky position I'm in to ask you a question that I've always wanted to ask you. Your answers across global stage have been very precise. They've been very witty. I'm always curious to know, have you always been this person? Or starting out when you were very young, was there a nervous you who was worried and not as bold and strong with your answers or as witty?
I think all of us were always nervous. Us. I think it grows with with time. Uh, and look, when you first set out in the world, I envy the young people of today. I had I first traveled on an aircraft when I was 22 years old, because in those days, normal middle class people couldn't afford to travel by air.
True.
I first went abroad when I got a job in the Indian Foreign Service, because those days people didn't take holidays abroad. So we knew much less about the world,
Yeah.
and even about ourselves. The exposure was relatively limited. So, and all of that in some ways reflected on your confidence levels.
Yeah.
But in a way, I was lucky. I first went to Moscow. Uh, my second posting was Washington. So when you've done, you've been thrown into big pools, you learn to swim. They are big, deep pools sometimes. I had, bosses who gave you the latitude, the leeway. You learned on the job. I had good colleagues, peer group or mentors, very important in life. I mean, to me, still, there are a few people I remember almost like in any situation, even now. I mean, when others would look at me for mentorship, but I still remember my mentors.
Right.
So it grows on you. I mean, there isn't a particular moment, but let me tell you, I mean, two things. All of us started down this journey. And I tell people sometimes, we all remember the good moments, like the jumping with joy, even though it was before the result. But sometimes it's also useful to remember, the times you didn't make it, the numbers which were below what you hoped. So
True. I think it
that's
builds
part of it.
empathy
Sure,
towards
sure.
others. Thank you so much for that. And with that, I'm going to now read out the questions we've been sent. Here's the first one. How do you see the US presidential election outcome impacting Indo US ties, especially given Prime Minister Modi's strong personal rapport with President elect Trump?
What do you mean specially given? I mean, we have it taken care of. So, I mean, the Prime Minister was among the first three calls, I think, that President Trump took. And look, India, I mean, one, Prime Minister Modi has actually built rapport across multiple presidents. When he first came to DC, Obama was the president, then it was Trump, then it was Biden. So, for him, there's something natural in terms of how he forges those relationships. So that's helped hugely. And I think, the changes in India have helped as well. I mean, I know today a lot of countries are nervous about the US. Okay, let's be honest about it. We are not one of them.
Right. That's wonderful. That's great news. Lots of smiling faces in the audience. Sir, the next question that was sent in is this one. How do you see the reset in the global power dynamic play out as the balance of power shifts in some ways from the west to the east? And what are the likely intended and unintended consequences?
You know, Look, yes, there is a shift. We are ourselves an example of the shift. Uh, if you look at our economic weight, you look at our economic ranking, you look at uh, even Indian corporates, their reach, their presence, Indian professionals, which I spoke about. So no question, there is a rebalancing. Okay, and to my mind, it was inevitable. It was inevitable because at one level, because once these countries, after the colonial period, got their independence, they started making their own policy choices, then they were bound to grow. The part which is not inevitable is uh, some grew faster, some grew slower, some grew better, and there the quality of governance and the quality of leadership came in. So there is, in a sense, therefore, the constant and the variable. There is a trend towards a more diverse, multipolar world, but there is also, a period when countries really surge ahead. I mean, it's a bit like would happen in the corporate world as well, and that's what you are seeing. But do remember one thing: the the older, the Western economies, the older industrialized economies, they have not gone away. They still count. I mean, they are still today prime investment targets. They are big markets. They're strong technology centers. They are hubs for innovation. So uh, let's recognize the shift, but let's not get carried away and kind of overstate it,
Right.
and distort our own understanding of the world.
Right. Thank you for that. Here's an interesting question. What's the one lesson from diplomats that you think business leaders need to learn?
Well, look, I think the real trick in diplomacy is to put yourself in the shoes of the other person, not just in the shoes, actually
The head.
in the head of the other person. That you train yourself. And that's, why do we learn a language? Why do we spend time, out of the country? Why do you fraternize? Why do you immerse yourself in other people's habits? Because ultimately you want to get in there. And if you can get in there, I mean, it's like, I mean, in a sense, I'm the sports analogy. You're actually anticipating what the bowler is going to do because you are in the bowler's head. Or nowadays, from a Bumrah perspective, we're going to anticipate what a batsman is going to do because they're now in the batsman's head.
Right.
So, how, this to me is a very, very important skill. It takes time, lot of experience, and some natural talent.
True. You have to be like a sponge. You have to have empathy, I guess. And also, lot of the bookish stuff may not be reality, and you learn so much about culture and the way people think. Here's another question. How is PM Modi as a boss? Do you have early yearly appraisal sessions?
I have daily appraisal sessions. Look, uh, I'd say, I mean, in a way, it's been for me pretty much, except for a year and a half, I was out of government, about 10 plus years continuously. Uh, in a way, I would say he is honestly a demanding boss, exacting boss. And I say that because he prepares, you know. I mean, if you are discussing something, uh, you have to be, you have to come fully prepared. I mean, you have to know what you're talking about. You have to make your uh, argument or your case or whatever it is. You must stand your ground. You must have the data. So I, a second characteristic I would say is he's a very interactive boss. There are bosses who have made up the mind before you talk to them, or there
Right.
are those who listen to you, give you a decision. His way of decision making is very much interact. It's there is a certain
Back and forth.
back and forth out there. And I frankly, I say this in all honesty. I mean, I've enjoyed working with him because, you know, he takes a call. He takes a call and then gives you that latitude, you know. So, say, for example, I'm giving you, let us say, the Ukraine. Okay. Once, I mean, he took a call that we need to get people out, do what it takes, use the Air Force, use the civil aviation, talk to people, tell me what I have to do. If I have to make a phone call, I will do that. If you have to send ministers out there to, so, but then he gives you that operational freedom. I mean, he will monitor it. I mean, he will want a feedback. Okay. I mean, it's not like he's not tracking you, but he's not micromanaging you. He's not second guessing you.
Right.
So in that sense, I've actually, frankly, enjoyed the experience of this job.
That's a beautiful answer and lots of takeaways from that. Here's a wonderful question. Given your father's distinguished career, what are some of the formative values and principles that he instilled in you, and also what you may have absorbed?
Well, look, my father, for those who may not be familiar, was also working in the government. And he was again I mean, he was a very he was not a typical government bureaucrat. He had a particular set of jobs which had a certain public activity. So he used to write, he would speak. Even when he was in the government, he would press his point of view. So the one thing certainly I carried away from him is to be a believer. I mean, if a job, work is not something you do from 9 to 5. I mean, and it's not something where you do your bit and it's somebody else's problem after that.
Right.
So I mean, or you say in bureaucracy, it's not like the file left me and so he had a very strong beliefs on many issues. I mean, in those days, for example, the nuclear issue was very strong. A lot of it, he spent a lot of his time on defense related issues. So if you have to learn to kind of fight for your beliefs and your policy convictions. But at a personal level, I think, look, we were a very typical middle class family with all the middle class habits which came. And I think many of those are very good habits. I mean, you live within your means, you do many things yourself. You
Reuse old cans.
well, among among other things,
My
yes.
family. Yes, sir. But we're so short on time, down to my, I'm going to pick the last question. What's the atmosphere like when you're in the middle of intense negotiations with other countries? And what would be a few tips on negotiating?
Look, uh, we go back to the diplomacy business.
True.
I've also learned from people in business, I must tell you. I mean, I've seen some really perceptive. I even had a short stint in business, if you know, between my civil service and my political. It was my gap year, you
True.
can say. Uh, so, if I were to uh, share a negotiating tip, it would be to uh, study whoever you are meeting as exhaustively as you can, and bond with them as quickly as you can, so that when the tricky issues come, they already begin to like you.
Right.
So if you are meeting someone, okay, I've actually picked up knowledge of sports, for example. Most people in the world, by the way, if you really want them to be nice, you want
Drop guard.
drop guard, do sports. I'm now talking my generation, okay? So do sports, maybe do, films, music, food.
Right.
So the more you study them, more data you have, and often you don't have, you wing it as you go along. Uh, but today you get a lot about people. You know a lot about people you never met, because the information is out there.
True.
So the more you can bond with them, then I find, actually, you'd be surprised how many of our problems. Sometimes you people say, okay, look, I I really can't do it, but this one time I'm doing it for you. You know.
Right.
And they do that because somewhere you have made that effort to make that one time difference.
Right. So beautiful. It's actually all about the human connection, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And empathy to the other. Thank you so much, sir, for your time, these wonderful chats and contributions. And it's just always wonderful to hear you speak and have you here. Sir, I would request you to just step this way, because it is now my honor to invite Mrs. Rajshri Birla onto the stage to felicitate Dr. S. Jaishankar for his distinguished service and contribution. Mrs. Birla, who has a very long-standing commitment to education, philanthropy, and social welfare, continues to inspire us all. And it is a privilege to have her present here. And I would request her to please grace the stage and offer a token of appreciation.